Well, good morning, everyone. We welcome you this morning to our Kairos Initiative webinar entitled College Interrupted, What Now? We are so grateful for your being with us this morning to be a part of this important conversation. So thank you for setting aside the time here to join us, and I'm grateful for the panelists that we have today to come and share their experience and their wisdom and their heart and love for college students and the families that they minister alongside of. My name is Wilfred Orrock, and I'm the coordinator of the Kairos Initiative of the Baptist General Association of Virginia. And the work of the Kairos Initiative of the BGAV is to connect our campus and our congregational ministries with college students and young adults in order to disciple them as leaders and to help them discern their vocation that they might pursue a life of mission. So it's made up of the work that you're doing in congregational settings, the work that our BCMs are doing on campus, and all of those in between and all of those spaces in our communities where we're trying to disciple young adults well. And we know that it's been a difficult time for them as it has been for you. And so we hope that you'll be encouraged by our conversation today, get some practical guidance, some good insights into how to minister during this time of COVID, but most importantly, just to realize that there are no experts in the time of COVID, just those who are trying to faithfully pursue God's calling in this place and time. And so we really want to come alongside you as a partner in ministry, as a friend, as a resource, and just to know that we're here with one another trying to serve faithfully. I'm happy to co-host this webinar this morning with my colleague, Karen Gald. And Karen is our program and network associate of the Kairos Initiative. And so she and I tag team all of the good work that the Kairos Initiative is doing. And so she and I are grateful to be able to share this conversation with our friends, Ben and Eli. So quickly to introduce our panelists today, Ben Brown is the Minister of Students at Second Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia. And Eli is the Minister of Spiritual Formation at Harrisonburg Baptist Church in Harrisonburg. Both Ben and Eli work in the space of student ministries and collegiate young adult ministries and have in their own way and in their own unique context journeyed through this COVID time, dealing with the disruptions and interruptions of our college students and the place that they find themselves in. So we look forward to hearing from Ben and Eli in just a little bit, and we thank you all for joining us and for being a part of today's conversation. Ben and Eli, thank you for your time and your wisdom, and we look forward to chatting with you in just a bit. As we begin our webinar, just a little bit of housekeeping to understand how to best utilize the Zoom features and functions. You'll see that there's two primary features that we'll use during our conversation today. The first is the chat feature. And so if you're here with us, and we'd love for you to just go ahead and drop your name and where you're coming from in the chat so we can kind of have an idea of who's around the room, who's watching on the other side of the screen. And so go ahead and put your personal information in there, not all of your personal information, just your name and where you're coming from. And then we'll also use the chat feature to kind of highlight anything that our speakers share during their remarks, whether it's a resource, a quote, or just something that we want to make sure that we lock into. If you have a question that you'd like to share with our panelists at the end of our time this morning, we would ask that you use the Q&A feature for that. We'll be monitoring the Q&A feature throughout the webinar this morning, and so that'd be a great place to kind of use as a parking lot for your questions. Maybe it's a question that you brought already, kind of queued up this morning as it relates to this morning's topic, or maybe it's something that Ben or Eli share that you would like for them to expound upon or to ask a little bit more pointedly. And so after both of them share their remarks, we'll have a little bit of time of Q&A, and that'll be your opportunity to engage our panelists this morning. We started planning this webinar about a month ago, towards the end of August and beginning of September, and it sure felt like a timely topic for that time, and it has just felt like every week since then it has gotten more and more timely as we've kind of played this whack-a-mole with what our colleges and universities around Virginia are doing. What was so strange about how this fall kicked off is how different it was from some of the scaling down and restrictions of the spring. If you remember, I don't know who remembers back to March and April, but if you do remember that time, there was a lot of uniformity on all of our college campuses about how they were shutting down. And so we were all kind of able to respond in concert together. We were all comparing notes, talking about how you're ministering to adapt to finishing out the semester. Many of you were trying to also finish a high school year with your high school seniors who were also ending the year poorly. But there was at least uniformity to it all as we were wrapping up the spring of 2020. And what has made this fall so challenging is that there really is none of that at this point in time for the fall. All of our college campuses and universities, even our high schools and public schools, they're all regathering and restarting in different ways, some with really tight restrictions and limitations. Others are quite permissive in allowing students back in lots of different ways. And so it's been a challenge for us to just sort of respond to the different variations of the regatherings. And I know that that's been difficult for you as a minister. And not only that, but we've seen across our whole network that our ministers are experiencing pressures on all sides. As a church leader, you're experiencing pressures from your families and from your congregants, some who are encouraging you to get back to church and to regather, and others who are encouraging you not to, and how to do regathering safely and how to do virtually effectively. And so it feels like a lose-lose situation, and at the same time, you're faithful to the ministries that God has called you to. You're adapting and you're finding creative and innovative ways to relate to your students, to love your families, and to be a faithful minister in your congregation. And so recognizing that pressure, we know, as I said earlier, there are no experts in the age of COVID. The things that we lean into in our ministries, people, the places that we serve, the purpose that we have behind it, even the play, just our way of fellowshipping and having fun together that really reinforces a sense of belonging and community. All of these things have been interrupted or disruptive in really profound ways. And so we just want to ask some of these questions together in our time this morning. To hear from Ben and Eli, what are you experiencing in your place of ministry? What have you been learning in this place of ministry? And how can you encourage your colleagues who are serving in these places with some new ideas, some new perspectives, or just throw some things against the wall and see if it sticks? One of the things that we'll talk about during this time is because there's no experts, then we do have this almost freedom or liberty to experiment a little bit, to take some risks, to try some new things, and to maybe figure out some new ministry perspectives or approaches that will extend beyond whatever beyond COVID looks like, and serve our ministries well long into the future as we continue to disciple young adults and students faithfully. So at the heart of all of this for our conversation this morning is the realization that we are in a Kairos kind of moment. The Kairos moments aren't always happy interruptions in our lives. Sometimes they are painful and challenging and exhausting, but they are interruptions where we have to pause and say, what is God trying to tell us? And what are we going to do with that? It's a time of adaptation and transformation. It's hard work. It can be exhausting. And it's even more difficult when we have other responsibilities and job expectations and ministry roles that we have to continue to keep up along the way as we're trying to figure all of this stuff out. And so I know that as I've been talking with ministers around our campus ministry network and around our congregational network, that you're all over the spectrum. Some of you are in that place of how long, oh Lord, like when are you just going to show up and solve this thing? How long are we supposed to be stuck in this place? Some of you are in that place of like, okay, this isn't what I signed up for, but it's what we got to do. And so we're going to do the work, and we're going to show up, and we're going to make this work. It's not ideal and it ain't pretty all the time, but we're going to be at it, and we're going to keep working at it. And some of you have experienced these really beautiful moments of fruitfulness and some degree of flourishing. And we're really excited about those stories of what God is teaching you and how some of your adaptations have actually worked, and how those were little glimmers of light and hope and sparks of joy and the really challenging time. So wherever you are on that spectrum this morning, if you're in the how long, O Lord, or the hey, didn't sign up for this, but we're going to make it work, or y'all, God is actually doing something in the midst of this. We're just grateful to have you here on the call. We're grateful that you've taken the time to be with us, and we do hope this is an encouraging time for you. And so I'm going to pass the baton off to my friend and colleague, Karen, to talk a little bit more about what she's been seeing and experiencing with particularly our college students as it relates to the campus side of things, and to share what Karen has prepared for us this morning. So Karen, take it away.
Thank you, Walford, and welcome everyone. It's exciting to see some names that I recognize in the chat box there. So glad that you guys are here with us this morning. And again, our hope ultimately is for you to be encouraged and equipped. So we hope that that is what you receive from our time today. So we know that most of you are ministers that are joining us, but we thought that we would be foolish if we didn't take a minute to talk about the folks that we are ministering to, these young adults. And so I wanted to start by sharing a quick illustration, a story that a good friend of mine shared on social media the other day about her sweet little 6-year-old daughter. And she had shared that her daughter went back to school this year. They live in a place where they were gathering in person for school. And Monday through Friday, she had been having a wonderful time. She had been getting great reports back from her teachers and sharing about, how much fun she was having. And then from the time that she got home on Friday to the time that her parents dropped her back off on Monday morning, she was a wreck. She was not obeying her parents. She was just emotionally really all over the place and just seeming to really struggle. And her mom, like a good parent will do, wanted to have a conversation about why this was happening. She was just so confused. So she sat her down and said, this is what I'm observing. Can you tell me a little bit about why you're feeling this way or what you're feeling? And in the best way that this little 6-year-old could articulate, she shared that she was scared that she was not going to be able to go back to school come Monday morning. So the entire weekend, she was operating out of fear because way back in March, her parents picked her up from school and she didn't see her friends again for months at a time, with having no real understanding or no real ability to frame why this was happening. And so that really got me thinking, if a 6-year-old is experiencing this, and her mom said, likened it to a PTSD. If a 6-year-old is experiencing this, then how much more so are our young adults who are aware of what the statistics are of folks that are dying inside and outside of the US. How much more are they aware of this, and how is that affecting them? And it made me think of this this quote in Meet Gen Z. This is a great resource that I'm happy to put in the chat box. But Meet Generation Z is great. But at the beginning, it says that some defining characteristics of Generation Z. It says, as members of Generation Z develop their personalities and life skills in a socioeconomic environment marked by chaos, uncertainty, volatility, and complexity, it is no surprise that blockbusters like The Hunger Games and Divergent, where their depictions of teens left alone to face a dystopian future, connect with them. Simply put, they are deeply worried about the present. And the interesting thing about this book is it was actually published in 2017. So most of the statistics in it are coming from 2015 and 2016. So this author writing that didn't even have any concept of what COVID was. So if this was true prior to all of this, then how is this so much more true for our young adults today? So my husband is the campus minister at the University of Richmond here in Virginia. So I have had the privilege of sharing some of that ministry and discipling the young adults and specifically the young women that are involved there, and hearing their conflict being at school this year, really from last spring. And then through the summer as we connected with them virtually, and then them regathering on campus, just hearing their conflict between being at school, but not being able to have the freedom or feeling the freedom from the administration to spend the kind of time that they want to with their friends, or just on campus in general. U of R is a small private university in Richmond, and so they are able to put a few more restrictions in place than some of our larger public schools. But for example, they are kind of restricted to on campus. So like once they got there a couple of weeks ago, they were strongly encouraged not to leave campus for any reason. And so they are from their residence halls to their classrooms to the dining hall and back to their residence halls, and that is it. And we all know that is not what they signed up for, as we talked about earlier. Not just ministers haven't signed up for this, but the students haven't signed up for it either. So how is that affecting them? And they've also shared that many of their professors seem to be overcompensating for what's been going on campus, and they have an even larger workload than they would in previous years. And they have no ability to freely and safely release that pressure that they're feeling. So I've been in and out of college ministry for the past decade. And as most of you with us are experiencing, this is the weirdest year. Weird is a light term, but the heaviest year to do ministry. And many of the things that we have taken for granted in ministry are just cut completely or just simply unavailable this year. And so we are having to be the most creative that we've ever been. But I'm confident that our presenters today have some great things to take away to hopefully spark some of that creativity. Another thing I wanted to point out is that because of all of these changes is that as ministers this year, measuring success is really going to be different than it has been in the past. And I think that that's actually a good thing. People in seats is no longer a helpful or a valid metric, right? It's the incalculable things that are going to be the most important measure of success this year. These relational connections, these vulnerable conversations, whether it's over the phone or FaceTime or text, it doesn't matter. These conversations that are happening and presenting these as many opportunities or touches as possible. Those are really our only measure. So focusing on what the students need is really the key question that we need to be asking right now, which I know that our panelists are going to highlight later. You may have previously done the best fall kickoff party in the land, and this year that's not possible, but maybe that's okay, because maybe what your students need to know is that they are safe. They're safe on campus. They're safe coming to your organization. They're safe meeting one by one rather than in a group of 100 where that feels like it brings anxiety. Maybe your students need a scheduled weekly text check-in on how their heart is handling these circumstances. And maybe they need their own chance to be creative and come up with something for the ministry that maybe you wouldn't have even thought of. So more so than ever, we shouldn't be afraid to share that load. And so I just wanted to kind of wrap up by saying that the reason I'm sharing some of these different things is that compassion is the thing that I really hope that we are walking away with today. Compassion on these young adults. We're all carrying a lot. And this was true even before COVID. But the reality is that we don't know what someone else is carrying, and we don't know specifically how much this is weighing on these young adults. And so we have to take a moment to consider what they're carrying in order to meet them with compassion. And that has to be our first response, just like it is with Jesus in the Gospels. I think of when he looks out on the crowd and he says that he has compassion on them, for they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. When I look at our culture right now, I feel like we are all like sheep without a shepherd, and so desperate for one. And so how great and how refreshing and how important it is for us to meet these young adults with compassion instead of condemnation or even misunderstanding. So the incredible thing that kind of brings us back to this opportunity of shepherding and impacting the world through these young adults is the last quote I want to share, also from Gen Z, which I thought was interesting because, like I said, this was published in 2017. So when he says the following sentence referring to 2020, he again had no idea that it was going to be so wild. But he says, by 2020, members of Generation Z will account for 40% of all consumers. They will not simply influence American culture as many generations would, they would constitute American culture. And I think we see that, you know, for better or for worse around the globe right now, we see that. But what an opportunity we have as ministers to step into that and point them to Jesus and to just to reorient what these young adults are doing and encouraging others to do for just the absolute beauty and glory of the gospel. So I'm so glad that we're all here gathered today and talking about this and really wanting to give a listening ear to our young adults. Yeah, to share a little bit more, I'm going to pass the baton back to Wilford. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Karen, for sharing those remarks and for helping frame our perspective this morning. I hope that this is what you all signed up for and that you're looking forward to hearing more from our panelists. And so I'm going to go ahead and just send it off to Ben to take it from here. So Ben Brown, like I said, is the Minister of Students at Second Baptist Church in Richmond, and just grateful for your time with us, Ben. So thank you for being here, and take it away.
Thanks, Wilford, and it's good to be with everyone this morning. Thank you all for being a part of this webinar and getting to have some conversation and some dialogue. You know, we're talking about question and answer, maybe more question and response, as none of us have the answers of what we're really looking for. But it's a good reminder for us that we're dealing with this in community as colleagues in ministry with the same and similar goals. And not trying to compete with one another. So in working with students at Second Baptist Church, a majority of my context is working with middle and high school students. I probably would put the statistics of like 90% of my work is working with middle and high schoolers, maybe 10% is working with college students. Within our context, we have some students that we engage with through VCU and the University of Richmond, but most of our college ministry is focused on engaging our students from Richmond that have grown up here and then have gone off to universities throughout the country. And we like to support the different college ministries that they're a part of. And so one of the things I want to share with you as I share my screen on here is the different ways that location is important for these college students. I know when I was in college, there was a big difference within the engagement of your college experience based off of the simplicity of where you're living. Are you living on campus or off campus? And that is even more heightened due to the current climate, due to different COVID things that are happening on our college campuses. It also changes the risk possibility for our college students. Living on campus or off campus, I know several college students that said, I have a feeling at some point, either this fall or this spring, that our university will close down and go completely virtual. And so they, in conversation with their parents, decided to pivot from on-campus housing to living off campus. With the reasoning for that, the thought was, we're going to get kicked out of our dorms at some point. Maybe some of that PTSD that Karen was talking about, and some of that grief from the spring semester of things getting cut off early, and having to scramble to collect different things from their residence halls and dormitories. And so it's changed the places where college students are living. Living in a single room versus renting with friends. That's a big cost thing for college students, depending on where you're living, as well as it increases or decreases your potential exposure to this virus. And also, as we have not seen necessarily uniformity, especially across Virginia, with the need for testing with those different universities and the surrounding areas. There might be a big difference between the percentages at Radford University compared to in Richmond. and compared to Old Dominion in Norfolk. And so the context that these students are engaging with for their learning, whether they're living on campus or off campus, and also the part of the Commonwealth or the part of the country where they are engaged within their schooling, has a large effect on what either their precautions are or the potential risk of them obtaining this virus and spreading it as well. I know from my current context, I know I've got some students that are college students that are isolated 24/7. They are living in a single dormitory in a residence hall, taking exclusively online classes. And I know that I've got other students that are in small in-person classes where they're spread out and they have different precautions where they're having to wear a mask and different things to keep them safe. I also know that I have students that have decided, I'm going to take a gap year. I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to do X and Y and Z or do some my own research on this. Or I have other students that have said, I was going to travel and go to this university, but I decided I'm going to spend a year or 2 years doing a community college option because of their safety and considering the cost for that as well. And so I know of a couple other students that started on campus and that time came where their deposit would have hit and they had paid for a meal plan up front as well as housing. And their parents had talked to them and they had weighed the costs and the benefits and said, all my classes are online. I'm going to move back home and return some of this money or receive back some of this money for on-campus housing as well as for a meal plan and that sort of stuff. But it changes their college experience. And so I find myself with my college students and engaging with them, asking the question that I hated so very much when I was in college that my parents would ask of, where are you? And I'm not asking that question either to be overbearing on our college students. I'm trying to figure out where their surroundings are, as it has changed over time for many of our college students, and trying to be aware of, are they away? Are they home now? Are they on campus, off campus? Trying to check in for some different pastoral care needs for our college students. One of the things that I love to do as a minister to students is getting to travel to these universities to see our college students in their new context. And I remind our students all the time of, you're going to feel homesick at some point in the fall semester. I usually advise them to say, if you have the opportunity to not go home until Thanksgiving, do it. You may have a fall break sometime in October. There may be a weekend that you may want to head home for a homecoming football game or something like that. And I would discourage them from doing it because you're going to feel homesick and your initial desire may be, I need to head home for the weekend and see my people in my home context, my hometown. And that generally, in my experience, will make things even more complicated. And so I remind them that one of the best ways to feel at home in a new place is to be a host. And so whether you have the opportunity of someone in a university that's close by you, a good friend, or to invite someone from your hometown, I'll go, show me around where you're living, show me where your classes are, show me the dining hall. And it gives that student the opportunity to be a host in their new context, which is so very valuable. And I know that our college students don't have that same opportunity. They don't have the same level of programming and engagement. They don't have that same opportunity to be a host in their new space. And so I'm wondering what the ripple effects will be of, especially these first and second year students, of whether they may never engage with a college ministry, whether they may never engage with a college campus and context, whether they will decide, this isn't the right fit for me, I'm going to try someplace new because of that key connection that never gets made. It's also broken down some of our relationships, which should be a natural relationship between our parish ministers within churches, and also the partnership with different collegiate ministers. I feel like it is pointed out to me some blind spots within my ministry and the connection, the importance of that connection. As we make that handoff of sending students, I know that usually I would send an email to make an introduction for a student that's heading to a university with their college minister, to be a point of reference, to be able to follow up with that minister about a particular student or students. And the opportunity looks completely different now than it did just a few months ago. It requires us to lean in and make a connection in a different way. And that's tough for us. And so all depending on where their context is. It also has encouraged some of our college students that travel to different parts of the country and different parts of the state, either to not engage with a local church, but to continue ministering with their home context. In some ways, that's great. We're happy to maintain a connection with them, but it is the challenge, I guess, of how do I minister to a student that's in Vermont? How do I minister to a student that's in Michigan right now? And how do I even minister to a student that's in Blacksburg when I'm here in Richmond? And I also have students that have come home, college students that have pivoted to a virtual option for this semester and possibly for the spring as well. And I'm realizing that my bandwidth between my setup before of kind of 90% middle and high school and then 10% focusing on college students and young adults, I don't have the bandwidth to create or to simulate the programming and the discipleship that their college ministers were providing for them, or these different local contexts were providing for them. While it is such a blessing to have them back home and to know that they're safe and to hope that they're safe, it also is the question of what do we do with these college students that are home for the semester, home for the year. And so I'm asking, the next question that I'm kind of getting to is asking the question of what do we need? What do I need as minister of students? And what do our college students need? What are they seeking? And I find this both helpful and somewhat discouraging. I see the importance from before of the different programming, the routines that our college students have, and finding myself somewhat incapable, and I'm sure that there are others that struggle with this too, of what do I do to provide discipleship and provide different opportunities for our college students? It may be the easiest thing to plug them in as volunteers, and I've done that with a few of our students that have come home, but they probably have different needs beyond that. And so being able to continue and to strengthen a relationship during this time of restrictions, and our church and context is not currently meeting indoors at this point. We're encouraging folks to meet outdoors in smaller groups potentially to mitigate our risk, but to still continue a relationship. I see the importance of the Kairos Initiative. I see the importance of connection with college ministers. And this has taught me a great lesson to strengthen those relationships, to be able to foster a continued relationship with different partners around the country and around the nation. And I've realized that I have their need for their college ministry too. There's also this ripple effect as well of when I was in college, I worked a part-time job, sometimes a couple of part-time jobs. And I'm thinking about our college students that either work in retail, work in customer service, work in food service. Many of these jobs are either not hiring, or if they are hiring, there's a high level of risk involved. And either their university is discouraging that for their safety or making that a non-starter for them. And so the ripple effect of, will this mean for our college students that are already handed a load of student loan debt, will they be taking out even more loans now? Or as Kara mentioned earlier, sometimes the workload, the academic load has increased to a place where I can't maintain a part-time job and do this, or it's just not safe. And so I think that there may be a continued trend of students taking out even more student loans to maintain their housing, to maintain their safety, and to not have to work while they're in college, even a part-time job. And this will increase the amount of student loans. And so the question is, within our context as the church, what do we do to help and assist and advocate students? I wonder if there's ways that churches can connect students to different scholarship programs, to provide scholarships for students, to even provide safe opportunities for work and employment, or to be on the advocacy side of helping students and partnering with students to have things like student loan forgiveness, or to look at what student debt looks like, and to create a realistic picture for students that head off to a four-year university and the amount of debt that they have afterwards. I know within our context, there has been the challenge of we usually hire a summer ministry intern that's usually a college student. We've done that for, gosh, probably close to a decade now, and didn't do that this summer for the first time in a long time. And we didn't do that because we didn't have the funding for it. It was really just a question of we don't know what we're doing as a ministry. And so how can we bring an intern on to assist us with this thing we don't know what we're doing necessarily? And also just the spreading wide of our context at church. For the most part, I'm working at home for part of the day to help with family things, and then working in the context in the church office. And it's changed our work schedules and our workflow as ministers. Even connecting virtually as compared to meeting in person has opened up our availability, which may be great in some ways, but it also helps us or encourages us to need to check our work-life balance as well. I think our college students are also pretty aware and savvy of the invitations that we give to them, whether we are considering their safety and their needs. And so when we are providing programming or providing opportunities for Bible study or fellowship for our college students, I think that they're pretty aware, and they should be, of, are we providing them a safe opportunity to gather, or are we providing them a reckless opportunity where we're not considering their safety? And so we need to be considerate of that as we invite college students and young adults to things. And not to gloss over the 200,000 Americans that have died from this virus, not to gloss over the 900,000 deaths worldwide, or the nearly 1,000 cases that are happening in Virginia. But there is a grace for us in 2020. There's a grace for us as ministers, as colleagues together. If you are like me, you are probably either feeling a pressure within yourself or a pressure from those around you to do something. And that's usually our desire as humans. We want to fix this. We want to provide something to help. I think that can be good-natured, but we also have to consider, are we doing this in a safe way? And we need to make sure that we're asking that question in a helpful way. So there is a grace for us in 2020. If we think about faith formation as only what we can do as practitioners, as ministers, to market and to sell and convince college students, then we've lost already. We were reminded that God is the one that changes hearts, that God is the one that transforms students and instills in them the different things for discipleship, and instills in them good values for their Christian walk and vocation. And that's not just exclusively our effort to instill that within them. And 2020 has created some new opportunities to try and to potentially fail, to feel like we have risk, obviously, with virus concerns, but usually starting something new in a church can be a multi-year process, and to challenge or to end something that was unproductive within the church is another process for us. And so there is this freedom within the concerns that we have of kind of restarting or reimagining what the church could be. One of the benefits that I think I've seen through this is competition is dead. And I feel like there has been a collegiality within different churches and different ministries to partner within this. And I hope that you've seen that as well too. I hope that you felt that as you've either tried new things or talked to a ministry or a church down the road that has tried something and either done it successfully or failed. I think one of the things I'm encouraging myself to do and others around me is we need to share our notes, the ones that you created. You shouldn't share someone else's hard work. But to be able to share a success, not in a braggadocious way, but to say, we tried this and it worked. and here's what we used for it. And if you're interested in doing something similar, we'd love to help you with that. Oh, or if you're on the receiving end the other way, to say, we're going to share this with you, and to partner as churches and ministries together. I put it this way: 2020 is maybe the world's largest group project, and we need to be found faithful in working at this together. We can't go into our silos for our own protection and our own competition, and to see this as me versus you, but instead we need to be cooperative, to be safe for one another, to be safe for those that we work with, for the college students and young adults that we work with, and to be able to partner with one another, to share ideas, to be able to share things that work and are successful for us. And also just another word of encouragement. I feel like in 2020, I have spent more time looking at blank pages on computer screens than maybe ever before. And I've had this longing within myself of, I had to come up with something perfect. I had to come up with something that is clever and appropriate, and people are looking to me to be the one to tell them what to do and to make them feel better. And maybe you felt a similar way too. And I found myself frustrated with myself and frustrated with God of not being able to find the words to encourage people, to encourage myself. And in those moments, it's a good reminder that our writing and our work is not just what we put on paper. Our writing and our work and our ministry is not just people showing up to something, either whether that is a Zoom call or whether that is an in-person meeting. Our work and our ministry is about transformation. And it's not about competition. It's not about our own success from what we saw in previous years and judging that against itself. But our work is in transformation. This is not about competition and survival, but instead we should be looking towards cooperation and compassion for one another. And so those are some of the lessons that I'm learning through 2020 and through these different COVID precautions and working with college students. I'm excited to be able to share those with you, and want to pass it off to my colleague and my friend Eli within her context in Harrisonburg. So thank you.
Thank you, Ben, so much. I appreciate all that you shared with us. And I wanted to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to share. I appreciate the reminder that none of us are experts in this. We are all, it's a big group project, or we've called it a great big long experiment here at the church, trying to maneuver our way through all the chaos that we have experienced this year. And there just isn't a handbook for this, as we've shared several times. So we're all kind of experimenting. I am the Minister of Spiritual Formation at Harrisonburg Baptist Church. I've been here for about 4.5 years. And just by the token of the way Harrisonburg is built and where our church is located, we can't not be involved in college ministry. And I'm grateful that the church is very aware of that. There are several colleges and universities in the local area, but we are virtually right across the street from JMU. So we have a really special relationship with JMU. The JMU campus minister, Brandon, is our part-time intern here at the church. So we really like to work well with the BCM and the college ministry when we're able to work together and support that ministry. Because as you guys know, that's just such a vital and important ministry to our college students and to our churches as well. What we were doing a little bit before, and I need to share this just to kind of set things up. We had a couple in our church that came to me about 3 years ago, I would guess, wanting to provide home-cooked meals to our students every week, once a week. And it ended up happening on Sunday mornings following worship. We would have Sunday lunch together. The first year we did this in the home of one particular couple in the church, and then the next year it ended up kind of bouncing around from church member to church member. But it was almost always a home-cooked meal and conversation afterwards. And so what was so important about that is the connecting and the relationship building and the meeting people where they are. And while we can't do that exactly the same way in these days as we could then, the same need is still there. We still need to find ways to connect with people and meet them where they are and recognize any needs that can be met, or just an acknowledgement of what folks are struggling with. Our students here at JMU were in school for less than a week, I think, or just at a week, when it was announced that they would be sent home and have classes virtually for the next 4 weeks, so that they could kind of hopefully get rid of some of the COVID cases that were that the college was dealing with. And so, but just in that one short week, we talked with college students who were expressing great anxiety and nervousness about, I'm not sure what comes next. I don't know if we're going to finish out this semester. Just so much anxiety about everything that we've talked about already and more. And fear and concern about fellow students and families, and just so much that's on their plate. And so we were trying to figure out how we as a church could continue to minister to these students. And I think one of the most helpful things we did was in that first week, when they found out that they were going to be going virtual for the next month, we just had a simple Zoom conversation like this and invited students who wanted to participate to just share their grief, to name it, to speak it, to just talk about it. And we didn't have a huge amount of students. We had just a couple of students that participated in this. But I think even because of the size of the group, it was so very helpful to be able to give those students that participated a place where they could take their grief and they could express it. And then we had a group of folks that were on the same call that just simply gathered to pray for those students, to speak their names aloud, to offer their support and encouragement. We are looking at getting folks in the church to send handwritten cards to some of our students on a regular basis, whether they're at school or home or somewhere in between, doing our best to find out where they are and connect with them. But there's a gift in just knowing that they're being thought of and that they're being acknowledged, and that we recognize the struggle that their lives are in and the upheaval that this has caused them specifically. We've also looked at providing sort of quarantine care packages or even gift cards for local restaurants and grocery stores and things that can help them. Ben talked about the financial struggle and all that means, and it's just even more difficult than it is normally with what they're dealing with right now. So we're just trying to find ways to recognize the struggle and to let the students know that they are being seen. We have been meeting on Sunday mornings outside. In our community, we have a lawn right outside the yard, right outside the church. And we've been meeting outside since the beginning of July. And we gather in our camping chairs, our lawn chairs, and just sit around and have a worship service. One of the things that folks wanted to do is to purchase extra camping chairs so that they're available when college students show up. Most of them aren't walking down the street with a chair on their arm. So we just was thinking of ways to provide, just to help them know that there's a place for them. And it can be as simple or as significant as providing a chair and a place for them to sit. And because we can't do the lunches every Sunday, we have been providing prepackaged items, granola bars, sort of brunch items, because we've been meeting a little earlier, and just sitting around in a large circle outside, socially distanced, and providing a place for them to gather just to talk about school and whatever else might be going on in their lives. We've tried to open up the church for a place for students to come and study if they need Wi-Fi, if they need a place of quiet. There is plenty of space in this church that sits empty during the week. And what a great way to make use of that empty space by inviting students to come and join us and find a quiet place where they can do what they need to do. I think it's really interesting and important to be open to opportunities that God brings your way. Ben was talking about how there's so much in the church that takes forever to get things approved and passed sometimes. And sometimes we are our own worst enemies, I think. But this is an environment when we have a little bit of freedom to try those new things and to open ourselves up to what God might be calling us to do in these moments. because we have a bag lunch program at our church where we offer folks on Saturday afternoons a meal, normally a warm meal, but right now it's just a bag lunch they can take with them. The local hospital in town started connecting with the church, asking if we could help feed families that were going home from the hospitals who had been dealing with COVID because they just didn't have the money to provide food for themselves. We were blessed, actually the opposite of Ben's story at Second Baptist, but we had our first summer college intern this summer. And her job description changed completely from June to August, but she was very open to that. She became very instrumental in connecting with these families, many of whom were Spanish-speaking families, and she's bilingual, so she was able to help us communicate in a way that we didn't plan to do and in a way that we didn't expect. And so it's just being open to God's invitation in this crazy mixed up world that we're living in. God bless our new pastor. We have a new pastor that started in March. His first Sunday was March the 15th. And so as you, I'm sure know, that's the Sunday that everything went crazy for the churches. But Matt has been on top of, like I said, you can't be at Harrisonburg Baptist Church and not be involved in college ministry. And Matt hit the ground running and has really worked to push our congregation into the community in a very new and real way. And so we just, again, that great big group project experiment has continued in so many ways for us here at the church. I think the cold weather will be a bigger challenge in the coming weeks and months. I know that we're not quite there yet, but it's looming over us. Winter is coming. I have heard about ways that you can gather on Zoom and play games together, and there are ways to experiment with that. We can talk about that later. There are movie nights that can be had on Zoom, and I know that many of us are just exhausted and worn out by these video calls and conferences, but it's so important, as we said, to continue to reach out to people, to see people and reach people where they are. I think that, again, just being open to the challenges, listening for God's call in this specific time, in this specific place is huge. We have been planning a Sunday evening service once a month, again, out on the lawn, but one that's a little bit different. We're not one of those cool, hip churches where you have the greatest, the greatest features, the modern, postmodern praise or whatever. So we're trying to do a Sunday evening service where we can be a little more open to what might most interest college students and youth and others, but trying to just find ways to connect with the community and with folks. And we can't be ignored when we're sitting out on the lawn and the college students. However, so many of them have gone home. There are many still in town because of living in apartments, living in homes around the area. So as many that have left, many more are still here in the area. So we continue to try to reach out to those college students. And I've been thinking a lot about, I read a book back in the spring that reminded me of the story of Hagar. And you'll remember that Hagar was the handmaid of Sarai when she had not been able to give Abram a son, and they had been hoping for this child for so long. And she offered up her handmaid to Abram so that they could have a child, and she felt like that was the thing that she needed to do. But obviously some things didn't work out well in that story, and Hagar kind of gets the short end of the stick in a lot of ways. And she runs off and is in the wilderness trying to escape the abuse that she was in, trying to escape the situation that she found herself in that was nothing that she had chosen, nothing that she would have picked for herself. And she interacts with an angel of God who tells her that her son has promise and that her son has purpose. And she has this experience and she recognizes this angel from God, and she calls God the one who sees me. And I just am so struck by her recognition of God being the God who sees us. I think it's so important for us to remind college students and all of those to whom we're ministering that God sees us right where we are, that God recognizes our struggle, and that whatever our struggle, we are not alone in this. God sees us, and God is with us, and God goes before us and behind us and beside us and walks this journey with us. But I think students really need to hear that right now. Like Ben said, they may be home, they may be in the dorm, they may be staying with a friend. We might not know exactly where they are, but God sees them. And I think a lot of times they just need the reminder of that. And I want to sort of add to that, that idea of God's grace. God's grace, as Paul reminds us, is sufficient for all of us. And that includes you who are trying to minister in this day and age, in this very unprecedented time. 2 Corinthians 12:9, in the Message, it says, my grace is enough. It's all you need. My strength comes into its own in your weakness. And I just want to encourage you to know that that grace that we preach and share to others is a grace that covers us as well. And I want you to hang on to that. And I want you to know that God sees you too, as we try to find new ways of reaching out to folks and ministering to folks. Allow yourself to be covered in that grace of God, and know that wherever we go, that grace covers us. As we've said several times here, we are not experts. We're just all trying to figure this out together. And so I think these conversations are wonderful because they allow us to hear from one another. They allow us to share ideas with one another. And they just encourage us to keep on trying and experimenting and stay in the middle of that group project. I thank y'all very much. And I appreciate the time to talk to you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Welford at this point.
Great. Thank you so much, Eli, for sharing that. Thank you, Ben, as well. Just grateful for your heart, your wisdom, and the spirit of experimentation and compassion in this for your students, for yourselves, for your own families, and for the families of your students. So just I want to highlight a few themes that came out today before we jump into the time of Q&A. But before we do that, I just want to share, if you've got a question for our panelists, go ahead and drop it in the Q&A feature. Also, if you've got a resource, whether it's a book, an app, a virtual platform that has worked for you, something that you would recommend to your colleagues in this area, feel free to drop that into the chat box as well. We're always open to new ideas, new ways of being able to connect virtually and digitally. So if you've got something that you would recommend, please do drop that in the chat feature. But thank you both, for all three of you, for your remarks this morning. And you know, a couple of consistent themes are opportunity during this time to embrace the small and simple. We can't lean into some of the productions and programs that we've just sort of leaned into in the past. And just because it's small and simple doesn't mean it's easy. It actually takes more time and intentionality, but there's something beautiful in that space of simplicity. Also, I appreciated, Eli, the ways in which you were able to highlight that it has given the church an opportunity to be more attentive to the social and community needs in our area. This is so true. Like, you know, there's just ways that we are all paying attention to new aspects of our communities that we probably should have been paying attention to all along, or paying attention to more. But now, like, the need is there, and the church has a function in the community to serve the needs of our neighbors. It's what Jesus calls us to do. It's the second greatest commandment. And so the very practical ways that COVID creates space for the church to love and serve our neighbors, I think is beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. And Ben, I appreciated how you highlight just the emphasis on considering the safety of our students and our young adults. I work with our students down at VCU, and they're really not particularly concerned about the virus. They just want to be together, and so yeah, sometimes we got to rein them in. And you know, everything says, hey, they don't get it, or it's not that big of a deal, or they just don't. They're just so stuck all summer long. They're just ready to be social. That it is important for us as ministers to be explicit about the spaces that we're creating, that they are safe, and also not to either sort of covertly or implicitly encourage their unsafe gatherings. They're going to find workarounds. They're going to say, well, if it's not a Second Baptist event, or if it's not an HBC event, we're just meeting up at somebody's place. You got to be like, guys, gals, friends, So I appreciate that emphasis on safety, and then finding those creative ways to connect and to experiment. So as we dive into this time of Q&A, I'm going to toss it off to Karen for our first question. And if any of our participants or viewers have a question, please do share it in the Q&A box.
Thanks, Walford. So as I was listening to you both, thank you so much again. I loved the very practical things that you gave, all the way from Ben considering what are maybe the scholarship needs for some of his students, and then Eli, where are they going to sit if we're able to gather outside? That's so fantastic to see the range of those very practical needs. So that's wonderful. So as Wilford highlighted, that we're in a season where we're really embracing the small and the simple, but a lot of times the small and the simple gets overlooked. So what are some other things that you're feeling that are being overlooked, whether that is emotionally within our students, or just concept-wise within the church or your staff team, or on college campuses? What is maybe one thing that you would feel like has been overlooked that we should pay more attention to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think we realized kind of in our process of, we have a COVID-19 response team within our church. We made that up of some medical experts and different people that had different vantage points, including our ministerial staff was given an invitation to be a part of this discussion process. And we realized upon our probably third or fourth gathering, some of the blind spots. And one of those areas that we brought up was, man, we didn't think about putting a student on here to get a student's perspective, to have a college student on a team like that, a decision-making team, would be really, really helpful to consider their needs. And so, yeah, I think that would be a challenge for all of us. While we may not be the ones who have a particular advantage of selecting all the individuals to be on a committee or a team, we can be people that open up this decision-making process to some of our students to really assess their needs, to assess the things that they're seeking and desiring, and to either adjust or pivot our programming or our relationship building activities as a church to what they're looking for and what they're seeking.
Go ahead, Eli, if you have anything to add.
I really don't have anything to add. I'm sure if we open this up, we can think of all sorts of things that we are overlooking. I think we learn something new every single day. Why did we think about this? We are preparing to go indoor for worship in November, if we can make it outside on Sunday mornings till November. And so we're really just trying to think through the logistics of that. We have a COVID team also. And like Ben just said, I'm not sure that we have a college student on there. And so that goes back to just making sure that their voice is heard, and that that we are seeking to find a place for them. I think there's just a new thing, a new challenge that we face every single day. And trying to figure out, the JMU students are supposed to be meeting back in person again, October 5th, I think is the date. So we're just kind of trying to think through all of those things and listen to the college students and ask them and seek their suggestions. And they have a lot to say. So I know there are things that I'm overlooking right now, but I think just kind of continuing to be open and keep that communication going is so vitally important.
Thank you both. In this spirit of experimentation, and Ben alluded to this in his comments, the church tends to be generally experimentally adverse. We don't like risks. We want to see proof of concept before we throw something out there, because if it fails, it reflects poorly on the leadership or on the staff, or just costs time and money. And yet this is a time for us to experiment. And so given that both of you all in your roles are associate ministers in your positions, most of the folks who will be viewing this either live or the recording later on are in associate level positions who work with students. Can you talk a little bit about the ways that your senior pastors that you work with, the staff teams that you work with, the parent and volunteer leadership that you work with have sort of fostered this culture of experimentation, whether explicitly or implicitly, kind of created this space where you as a minister can feel empowered and emboldened to try something new when that's sort of not been our default most of the time, that the church is operating out of a sense of strength and health. So I hope that question makes sense, but just talk a little bit about how you as a staff team approach this culture of trying something new and also working with your parent and volunteer leaders as well.
I will say that I think having a pastor who started right at the beginning of this has really served us well in many ways, because he hasn't been around to have the baggage of this committee won't like this or that committee won't like that. You know, he's like, why can't we just try this? You know, he's wide open and ready to just try anything. The first day of school, he texted a couple of us and said, let's go stand over at JMU and give out warm coffee to students, you know. And again, that wasn't something that needed to go through all those committees to be approved, which is so often the case. It was just folks recognizing that in these, some would call desperate times, that we have to be willing to try some things that maybe we wouldn't have in the past. We have a great supportive college ministry, college committee at the church. And this couple that I mentioned that started these Sunday lunches every week, these folks are just passionate about reaching out to these college students and making sure that they know they are welcome. And we're just very blessed to have folks in the church recognize. I know there are also folks that don't understand why we would spend time working towards college students. I've heard, you know, folks say they don't have any money to give, you know, that sort of thing that you hear, but that's very much in the minority. It is by and large a small group of folks that are just determined, some of whom, many of folks in our church are working at JMU currently or are retired. And so we talk about JMU a lot, but we really do try to make connections with Bridgewater students, with Eastern Mennonite students, with just all the students in the area. And I think we're just very fortunate. And we have a pastor who is setting the tone and also very passionate about reaching out to college students and reaching out to our community on a larger scale. But that obviously includes the college students that are everywhere in Harrisonburg.
Yeah, along those same lines with Eli, we've really felt a need and a necessity to be collaborative as a ministerial staff, as well as listening to outside voices and other colleagues and friends in different contexts to be able to share our resources together. I know we looked at reopening for in-person worship at a point where some neighboring churches weren't yet doing that. And one of the things that we did not want to do was to become the host side of, well, this church is open while my home church is not open, and so I'm going to start worshiping at this place. And so talk to area churches as a courtesy to let them know, hey, here's where we are in the process. Where are you all looking? What do you all know? And so that has been really, really helpful for our community and humanity together as colleagues in the gospel and colleagues serving the church. As Wilford alluded to earlier, our ecclesiology really has adjusted as we have sometimes ignored the pulse of those around us, or we've assumed we knew what the pulse was of our corner of Richmond. But instead to be able to say, we really need to put our ear down to the railroad tracks and hear what's going on, to put our finger on our pulse and to know what's going on in our community, to be listening for those voices. It also has encouraged me maybe to speak up in a different way within our staff meetings, within our time as a ministerial staff. I'll say this somewhat jokingly. I feel like I put my foot in my mouth a few months ago. We were talking about different virtual needs, and I reminded the staff that I majored in broadcast journalism at ECU. And as soon as I did that, I feel like I overcommitted myself. And as we were talking later in that staff meeting, we said, well, I need this for our video, and this person needs this, and we need video editing software. And I was like, well, we really just need to build a studio. And all of a sudden the money shows up for this, and it's like, all right, well, let's build this thing. And so we built a studio. And when I say studio, we're talking about lights and, some different things. It's, not a full-fledged television studio or anything like that. But that was something that we dreamed up together, and all of a sudden we're here doing this thing and sharing this resource within our church staff, and it's transformed some of our social media things, and it's helped us to dream in a safe and healthy direction. It's been important for us not to be siloed, and I think that is something that can happen and I know that I've served in a context where I felt like I was kind of siloed of, you stay in your lane and this person stays in their lane. And that's the way that our church is going to function. If we all are succeeding within our silo and within our area or concentration in ministry, that's how we're going to have success. And I feel like that's kind of broken the walls down for, we need to be collaborative. We need to be helping one another. And so both within our context as a church and within our context as a college ministry, but also in partnership with one another. So that's been really helpful for us.
That's great. Well, thank you both for sharing, and thank you for just the time and the investment that you've made in preparing your remarks for this morning and sharing with our community who were able to join us live, as well as those who will watch later on with the recording. Before I just kind of bring our time to a close, I just want to ask our panelists, is there anything that you wanted to ask of each other or something that popped up? And if not, that's totally fine too, but just wanted to give you the opportunity to have the floor before we close.
I was thinking as Ben was answering that last question that our church, Harrisonburg Baptist Church, I promise you, if a year ago you had said to me, we would be having live worship services on Facebook, I would never have believed it. Sometimes it takes these little kick in the pants moments to get us to where God wants us to be. And I'm not saying that God did this for that reason, but I think God uses these opportunities. And we have been able to find ways to reach out beyond our community. I just think it's amazing that we're moving into the 21st century here in Harrisonburg. So it's a good thing. And we've got some folks who are really excited about that. So I can't wait to see where God continues to take us. All of us.
Yeah, I definitely, I echo that too, Eli, of just how quickly we've needed to move technologically. And it's offered some opportunities to reach people that we never would have dreamed of before, or would have taken some significant focus and effort. And so we've learned about different muscles that our church has, and we've learned about different ways that our churches can flex together to change and adapt to meet the needs of community. And I hope that it's also strengthened our compassion for the efforts of one another. And so that's what I've seen so far, and that's what keeps me going from day to day, is the different ways we get to encourage one another, to welcome one another, to collaborate and have compassion together.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. As we wrap up our time this afternoon, I would like to share that we have some resources that are available to those who are ministering with college students and young adults on our website, as well as through your connection with the BGAV. And so I just want to direct you to the Kairos Initiative website, kairosinitiative.org. And on that website, if you go over to the resource panel, you'll find new resources for our ministry network. We are developing this page now and hoping to provide more content and digital resources for you and your ministries as we continue through the fall and into next year. But already up there, you can find some helpful resources around 5 commitments that your community can make in this time of COVID, some resources around adaptive leadership. And also on our website, you can find out more about our digital fall gathering experience. I know many of you are accustomed to gathering at Eagle Eyrie at the end of October to be with our college and young adult ministries from around the state to worship and to grow together in faith and in practice. And we're just not able to do that this year, but we didn't want to just, take it off the calendar and not have fall gathering. And so our keynote speaker, Sion Edgerton, worked with our development and marketing team to put together 4 messages along with 4 supplemental resource packets that we are going to provide digitally for our full Kairos network in the middle of October. So if you go to kairosinitiative.org, you can go ahead and pre-register for that so that when that is made live, you'll be able to get that download link. It's free to you and your ministry to use whenever and however you'd like to use it, but we just wanted to be a blessing to you during this fall to have a fall gathering-like experience and to know that we will all be together at some point in time down the road, but until then, we want to be here for you and with you to make sure that you are supported in the work that you're doing in this important area. And so also we would encourage you to follow us on social media. If you go to the Kairos Initiative website, you'll be able to find links to our Instagram page, our Facebook page, and our Twitter page. And as long as you're synced in with that, anytime we have new resources dropping or new webinars or videos or publications, we'd love for you to check that out and hope that that can be helpful to you. Aside from that, just know that Karen and I are both here for you as well to support you in your ministry and the work that you're doing. So we're just a phone call away or an email away. And we'll jump on Zoom, we'll have a call, and we'll see what's going on. If it's a struggle, if it's a success, we'd love to hear your story, get to know you better, and find ways that we can resource you. We're also recording this webinar this morning, and it will be available on our resource page as well once we've cleaned it up and edited it a little bit. So you can go back and look at that if there was a part that you wanted to rewind and check back again or hear that quote again, or send it along to a minister who wasn't able to join us today. We'd love for you to do that. So as we bring our time to a close, they didn't know that I was going to do this, but Eli, would you be willing to close our time with the word of prayer and blessing for the ministers who have joined us this morning?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Let's pray. Gracious and holy God, we are grateful for this time just to be together this morning. We thank you that we have this reminder that we are not in this alone, that we gather with colleagues, we gather with friends and other ministers and folks we're all trying to learn from one another. We're all trying to learn what it is you're calling us to in these very specific days. God, I ask your blessing on each ministry represented in this webinar, each ministry represented in Virginia Baptist Life. And I just thank you for Kairos and what it has meant to so many students and to so many ministries already. God, we ask that you help us to continue to be open to your leadership and to your guidance. And God, we're just grateful. We're grateful for all that you are teaching us, even in the midst of all of this. God, we thank you and we love you and we thank you for loving us. In your holy and precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. We are grateful for all of you, and we look forward to being able to follow up and having more conversations as we head into the fall. So blessings and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everybody.